Welcome to the Faces of Leadership podcast, presented by Command Presence Training and hosted by CEO Michael Warren. At Command Presence, we believe leadership comes down to two things: people and action. In each episode, we sit down with leaders from across professions and communities who are stepping up, making a difference, and leading where they are with what they have. Together, we'll explore the lessons they've learned, the challenges they've faced, and the decisions that shaped their leadership journey. Because the ultimate question isn't just what we can learn from them, it's what we can learn from each other, as we strive to become the leader we wish we had. Today, Michael is joined by Sheriff Rick Staly for episode 29, Build the People, Change the Culture.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Faces of Leadership podcast. Folks, I hope that you took the time to go and listen to our episode with Kevin Ray. If you didn't, here's a spoiler alert. Kevin and I worked together nearly our entire career. We went to the academy together. We've been together a long time. Some might even say we look alike. But Kevin has some tremendous insight on the value of accreditation in the public safety sector. But today, the show must go on, and I'm excited about our show today because our guest today, folks, now listen to these words, because I went and fact-checked this, because I was thought there might be a mistype on the website. Our guest today has over 45 years in the public safety sector. That is dedication right there, folks. He's currently serving as the sheriff in Flagler County. He's in his third term. And but before that, he served in a variety of roles in several different departments, ending up in the Orange County Sheriff's Office, where he ended up retiring as the Undersheriff. And just so if you don't know, Orange County is the 14th largest sheriff's office in the nation, and it's the fourth largest largest agency in the state of Florida. This guy has been around. He's seen a lot. He's done a lot. So if you would, please welcome to the show, Sheriff Rick Staly. Well, thank you for being with us today, sir.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's great to be here. And I'm glad you only said 45, because actually this year is my 51st year being sworn in the state of Florida. Now, for your listeners, I started at age 5, but
Exactly.
but actually age 19.
Well, and I just want to throw out there for our listeners who maybe are a little bit math disinclined, 51 is more than half a century. When you start talking more than half a century, that matters there. But I just want to, and I took some of this from the sheriff's office website, and I kind of want to start with you as a young person. What was it that drew you to this profession in the very beginning?
Well, if you listen to my mother, bless her heart, she's passed now, but she said as a young child, I would ride my bicycle pretending I was a cop and pulling over the kids that I played with. Now, I remember riding my bicycle and making it look like Adam 12, if anybody listening remembers that show. I don't remember pulling over my friends, but I don't think my mother would make that up. But I think, go ahead.
No. We got to trust moms. Moms.
Yeah. So I think what really did it for me is my parents divorced when I was 11 years old, and that was that's kind of the wrong time in a boy's life, right? And so we moved to Jacksonville, Florida, which quite frankly I hated. And so ultimately I moved back to Winter Park, Florida. My mother allowed me to go live with my dad, which, as I look back at it now, I mean, that had to break her heart to allow that. But for me, it was the right decision. And I started working at a gas station. And back in the days where somebody pumped the gas in your car.
Full cert.
So, yeah, full service. So Seminole County deputies would come in and get a car wash because we gave them free car washes. And I got to know them, and one of them invited me to become what they called a youth deputy at the time. It was a precursor to the Explorer program. And I took them up on that, and I guess I was hooked. This was in an era where you could ride with the deputies. So I ended up going through the ranks to become the captain in charge of the youth deputies. During my captain, we affiliated at that time with the Boy Scouts of America with the Explorer program. But I would ride with the deputies. I'd get into fights with them for resisting suspects. I would chase after the suspects with them. I would do the radio. I would do everything except drive the car, carry a gun, and write the report.
Yeah, and we didn't mind not writing the report. Get to go have some fun and not have to put pen to paper is a pretty good deal.
Right.
But it's funny because I got into policing largely because of my grandfather, who was a Georgia State Patrolman for 30 years. But I hate saying this because I make fun of him a lot. Man, it was neck and neck there with the fire service there for a little bit, because just recently we had Randolph Mantooth, who played Johnny Gage on Emergency, which was neck and neck with Adam 12 as being my favorite show when I was a kid. And then all of a sudden, when I was in college, Backdraft came out. So it was like a resurgence, but then I got pulled back to the blue side of things. But I don't think that people truly grasp what interactions that you have when you're a kid or when you're in those formative years. They can have lifelong influence on what you do.
Well, and I'm proof of that, because this was in an era where marijuana was very prevalent in high school and stuff, and I never did any of that stuff. So coming from a broken home, if you will, I don't buy that you can't be successful in that environment. And so, I think I'm proof of that. I think being the youth deputy and having a mentor that was in law enforcement probably kept me straight and narrow, and that was probably a good thing. And then fortunately, when I turned 19, I graduated from high school. 6 months later, I turned 19. In the little small city at the time, Oviedo, 1,900 population, the police chief took a chance on me and offered me a job as a police officer. Now, the funny part about this is they provided your uniform, but you had to provide your gun and ammo. Well, federal law was age 21. So my dad had to buy my first gun, my ammo. And so here I am, a 19-year-old law enforcement officer. And I could legally use deadly force, but I could not go buy the gun and the ammo. And so, yeah. So things have changed, but this was an era when there was no FTO program. So basically I was handed the keys to a patrol car, said, go on patrol. And there was only 9 cops for the whole city. That included the police chief. And so if I had not been an explorer, I would have had no clue what I was doing, because I was on a waiver where I hadn't even gone to the police academy.
Oh, my goodness.
I would work day shift on patrol and go to the academy at night.
Oh, yeah.
So things have changed a lot.
But probably for the better. I think we both agree for the better. But let me ask you this. So you're in the Explorer type program, and you go into a leadership role with that organization. Was that really your first real taste of what leadership was and what it looked like? And all of a sudden, here you go. Now you're in charge. How was that experience for you?
Well, it was great. To be candid with you and your listeners, Mike, I never looked at it that way, but you're correct. I mean, I went from corporal to, just an explorer, to corporal, to sergeant, to lieutenant, and then captain in charge pretty fast. And, but I had a vision and I worked hard.
But there's a lot to be said for hard work, isn't there? I think what a lot of people term as good luck is often hard work, wearing overalls and being in the right place at the right time and willing to do what's necessary.
Well, I think you're exactly right. In this country, I grew up very poor. I remember my grandparents bringing us food when my dad's business failed. And this was before my parents were divorced. That was probably the final straw. And, or we wouldn't have eaten. So, I didn't come from a wealthy family. And so in this country, I've had a successful career in Orange County. I've been a successful business owner. My wife and I started a security company, grew it to 3.5 million a year in revenue, 128 employees, sold it to a national firm, and retired. I think that was my second retirement. I failed at retirement, by the way, and then I was asked by the community to run for sheriff, and here I am on my third term. So, um, you know, I guess the proof that if you work hard and you set goals for yourself and have a vision, you can accomplish anything in this country. And that's why we're the greatest country on earth. Now, it won't come without roadblocks, uh, you know, things that you would prefer not happen in your professional and personal career, because I've had all of that. But what I tell my employees when something, what you would say would be negative in their career and their personal life, I would say, well, it's all about how you react. So, and I use this analogy, it's very simple. When those negative things occur, and that's in life happens, um, you can either make lemonade or lemon juice. Completely two different tastes. And so it's all about how you react. You can either look in the mirror and say, okay, how did this happen? Take responsibility and don't repeat that and learn from it. Or you can say, woe be me, it's somebody else's problem. And then you're going to repeat it or you're not going to be successful.
Well, Sheriff, one of the things that I struggle with as a parent and now as a grandparent is I struggle with, I don't want to tell my kids that, hey, you can be anything you want, because the reality is we've had very, very few presidents over the course of our, so you're probably not going to be president. But I do think everybody has the opportunity to be something. And I would propose to you that in our country, you really have to work at it to be nothing, to have nothing come your way. You have to be intentional about not working for that to happen to you. So I think if you're willing to put in the effort and you have an understanding of where you want to go, then you've got a pretty good shot of getting there.
That's very true. The opportunities are here. Look, in my career, I never dreamed of being sheriff. I said, oh, that's political. And, I wanted to be a police chief somewhere. I never was a police chief. Finalist in some very big cities over the years after I retired from Orange County. But that was never materialized. And then I became a business owner of a multi-million-dollar company. That was really never in my plan. Just a couple things occurred, and I was in the right place. I was willing to work hard, and then my wife and I sold the company for 7 figures. I never dreamed of that. I grew up poor,
But Sheriff, wouldn't you agree with me that a lot of times it's about where we choose to focus? If I'm constantly focused on the down and in and the right now, then it's nearly impossible for me to see what could happen and what is possible out there.
Well, that's very true. It's hard work. It is being somewhat in the right place at the right time and willing to take that opportunity if it comes to you. When my wife and I were starting our security company, which we sold in 2012, what we were told was the higher the risk, the higher the reward. And so if you never take a risk, you're not going to get that high reward. Uh, so now I'm not saying do crazy things and take crazy risks. That's not what I'm talking about. But there are risks in life, and we could have just as easily gone bankrupt in a security company that we started because most businesses fail within 5 years.
But Sheriff, I think that a lot of times businesses fail and people fail in the public safety sector because they haven't prepared properly. They haven't done their due diligence. You're right, we have to take risks, but they should be calculated risks. They should be based upon knowledge and my understanding of what's going on. And it sounds like that throughout your career, you've taken risks, but they haven't been reckless in nature.
Well, that's true. And I think one of the most important things is people invested in me. They mentored me. When I was going up the ranks in Orange County, I had sheriffs that invested in me. They sent me to specialized schools like that. And then I think it's critically important that if you're going to be a leader, that you empower people. And they may do things differently than you, but as long as what they stay within, I call the riverbanks being ethics, the laws, policies, and procedures. How you get from point A to B doesn't matter. Like I would probably go straight down the river, okay? But someone else might zigzag all over the place, but they stayed within those riverbanks. So who cares how they get there?
Well, Sheriff, I'm going to be very transparent with you here because you're in the state of Florida. In your analogy, Mike's not going to be in the river. Mike's going to be on the roadway that goes along the river because Mikey does not do well with snakes and that type of thing. But it's something we've talked about on this podcast before. I think leaders have to do a better job of asking themselves, is it right, is it wrong, or is it just different? And as long as I stay within those parameters right there of right, I have to let people do things. You've worked with a bunch of people in your career, and I bet there have been some people that you've been very close to, and you may have trained together, but you two are going to have different ways of doing things to accomplish the same outcome.
Well, that's true. And that's exactly what I mean is as long as they stay within those riverbanks, and if the mission is B, how you get there, if it stays within the policies, procedures, ethics, and the laws, then it doesn't really matter. And you as a leader have to be willing to empower the people to do it their way within those guidelines and not micromanage them. And that's pretty hard sometimes for leaders to let it go and let their employee perform. But you've hired them to do that.
Yes, and you train them to do that. And it's been my experience, and maybe yours is different, but it's been my experience that if we hire the right people and we train them properly, them staying within the bounds of what is right isn't usually the issue. It's them staying within budget that's the issue because they're constantly seeking to improve it, and they see things that maybe I didn't see, and they're trying to do a little bit more, and you kind of have to rein them in. But that right there is a good problem. If we hire correctly, we train correctly, we have a lot less people trying to get out of the river.
So, as sheriff and having owned a successful business, I look at things a little different. And my staff now totally understands what ROI means. What's the return on investment? And so now when they bring me a new program, they have to bring it to me. What's the cost? But what's the ROI? Because my philosophy in this agency is no crime is acceptable and that our job is to reduce crime. Now, we'll never get it to zero, but it's a cop-out when you say, well, crime's up because we're a fast-growing community. Well, since I've been elected sheriff, 45,000 new residents have moved here, and our crime's down 54%. So if you empower your people, you give them the tools, you mentor them, and you create a vision, And the vision is our job is to reduce crime. Now, I will tell you there was a fun, the other thing that I say is think outside the box, because our county government, and I'm a constitutional independent sheriff, so I get my money from the Board of County Commissioners, but that's it. They can't tell me anything else to do. I'm completely independent. So I wish the county would think outside the box more. But my team does, because they know that's what I expect. They'll come to me, and when I ask something that says, why are we doing this? Well, we've always done it. You want to hit my hot button? That's it. Okay. So my wife and I were recently at our cabin in Tennessee, and I was walking through this little store, and I found this coaster, and I had to buy it. I normally don't waste money, but I had to buy this one. So visualize this. The person's boss dies and is laying in the casket, and the employee is kneeling at the casket, leaning over to kind of like whisper to the boss. And he goes, who's thinking outside the box now? So I had to buy that.
Yes.
And I brought it back to my staff. In our next staff meeting, I said, hey, I want you guys to read this, because this is probably what you're going to say when I die.
But it's interesting because you brought up ROI, and a guy that I used to work for that I respect immensely. He always was trying to hammer home that leaders have to understand the difference between an expense and an investment, and they look the same in the ledger, but it's that return that we get, and it's been my experience that there's no greater return that we get than when we invest in our people, like you talked about, through mentoring and training and through coaching. And when we do that properly, our people turn around and they do extraordinary things.
They do. And you can look at my agency, your listeners, and maybe you don't know this. I was recruited by the community in 2015 to run for sheriff. I told them, no, I'm not interested. And eventually I got talked into it because this agency was in shambles. They couldn't retain anybody. They had a sheriff that they didn't respect. The community did not like the sheriff. And I lived in this community, and eventually my wife said, you need to run for sheriff for this community in that agency. It was either that or she didn't want me at home because I had retired. I'm not sure which. But so ultimately I was convinced to run for sheriff. Now I would put this agency up against any agency in the country. This agency used to go to surrounding agencies, steal their deals, and bring them back here. Now those same agencies are coming to us. How did we reduce crime like this? How did we empower our people? What technology are we using? So our real-time crime center I'd put up against anybody's. In fact, the Attorney General of Florida was just here yesterday, and I gave him a tour of our real-time crime center, our digital forensics unit, our cyber crimes unit, our CSI, that's state-of-the-art lab area. And it's all because we empowered the team. My goal, I'm the face of the agency, but my real role is to get them the resources that they need, whether it's equipment, people, staff, whatever it is. But once you get them, then you got to prove the ROI.
And so just a couple things if I could there. In the Army, the aide to a general officer is it's an aide de camp, but their nickname is dog robber. And when we're a leader, oftentimes one of our most important roles is that dog robber position, and then to turn around and be the cheerleader for our people. Because I think that leaders have the opportunity to see what that person is capable of, what they can become when that person can't. And you as sheriff get to go to people and say, hey, listen, I'm going to give you this right here because I know you can do it. And I know that if you do it, then we're going to be better. And then if we're better, guess what's going to happen to crime? We're going to see that reduction in crime that is our primary focus as a law enforcement agency. So when you talk about empowering people, I would be willing to bet that it's not just about giving them responsibility for something, but you also gave them authority to accomplish it. And you gave them the resources, because it doesn't do any good to empower people if you don't give them those things as well.
Well, exactly right. And I've worked for leaders that don't do that, and they were not successful. I worked for 5 sheriffs before I was a sheriff. 2 of those sheriffs were one-term sheriffs. Now, in Florida, it's extremely hard to be a one-term sheriff. You got to really work at it, okay? And both of those guys had a common denominator, their ego. And, to be a successful leader, you got to build relationships before you can be a true leader of that person. Now, when you're their boss, they'll follow you if you make them, but you want them to follow you.
Well, Sheriff, I'm going to kind of, it may embarrass you just a little bit because most people don't like to have good things said about them, but I'm about to say something good about you, because when we empower our people and when we train them well, we've hired the right person, and I'm going to use your word, when they are willing to sacrifice their ego for the good of the organization, then we see our people willing to sacrifice things for the organization and for organization members. And I found this out about you, is that when you were with Orange County, you put yourself at great risk. You put yourself at great risk for another agency member, and you received some very high awards. In fact, I want to make sure I read this right here. You received the Medal of Valor, you got the Purple Heart Medal, and you got the Florida Governor's Medal of Heroism because of what had been done for you. You went and sacrificed, put yourself out there. In fact, you were shot several times in order to save another deputy's life. That doesn't happen if we don't have leaders who emulate for us, who show us how to go and sacrifice for others.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike. It was quite an honor to get the awards, especially from the governor. I don't recommend the way I got it. I'm here, frankly, because of God and a protective vest. Because I took 2 in my right arm, which is my gun arm, as I was going for my gun, and the third one hit me in the chest. And the ER doctor said I never would have survived the round to the chest, and because it would have traversed through my heart. And I still have cracked ribs, or I'm sorry, I don't have cracked ribs now, but I still have the bruise and the scarring from that you can see today, if you know where to look. So I was very blessed, very fortunate, and I think it helped me make or be the leader I am today, because I've been sheriff 9.5 years now. They're 4-year terms in Florida. In that 9.5 years, we probably could have used deadly force 12 to 15 times. We used it once. And because we do a lot of training, a lot of empowering, good equipment on how to de-escalate. And so I'm very proud of our agency. And I talk to every new deputy sheriff that comes in. I'm the final stop before we hire them. And I go through, the usual questions, and I tell them, let me tell you what my expectations are. I won't tolerate excessive force. You're talking to somebody who was shot in the line of duty. I still go out on patrol. I still carry a ticket book in my car. I still make arrests. And I said, but just because you can legally use deadly force, if you can de-escalate without risking yourself, that's the expectation in this agency. And as a result of that, we have a great community interaction. and a great community reputation for not being fast to a gun. And so, I mean, they're issued everything, the batons, the pepper spray, the taser, and the list goes on. But it's the training and then empowering them to make sure they have the tools to make the right decision. I've had one deputy die in the line of duty that actually occurred in my detention facility during COVID. And so I don't want to bury a deputy. I don't want anybody to get hurt. But most of the times, if you train right, you can de-escalate the situation, and our agency is proof of that.
But Sheriff, I couldn't agree with you more. If we look at training as an investment rather than an expense, the people, it has been my experience, and I do a lot on the use of force side, the people who are most prepared to use force tend to use it the least because they're confident in their skills and they're willing, their brain is willing to go through the talking process in order to bring it to a peaceful resolution. When we don't train them well, we get overreactions. And that's when we start seeing, hey, you know what, the phrase that's in vogue now, lawful but awful. And so if you want to reduce it, increase your training in that area, and you're going to see that reduction.
So when I was working on my master's degree, when I started my career, everybody was a revolver, a wheel gun, right?
Right.
And so you had 6 rounds. Eventually we got speed loaders, okay, things like that. So this one professor I had when I was working on my thesis in 1990, 91, and semi-automatics were now coming out, were pretty prevalent. And he wrote a article, and he called it the spray and pray theory. That goes back to lack of training.
Yes. And that's a natural reaction to a dangerous situation for which one is not prepared. I'm just hoping something works. And if I haven't been shown what works and then shown how to accomplish it working, then that's what you're going to get. You're going to get that type of response. So you guys, your agency, and I know because we've done some work with you, you guys invest heavily in training your folks at the very beginning of their career, starting the FTO program. You didn't get an FTO program, but you have invested in an FTO programs. Why is it so important for a leader to invest early and often in their people?
Well, you have to remember, too, that the generation that you're hiring from is very different than maybe where the leader drove or grew up from.
Right.
Especially for me, because I've been done this so long now. And so you have to adjust and meet the needs of your new employee and your longer term employees. So things change. Imagine when I started my career. When I started in Oviedo, there was no CAD system. You know what it was? A 3x5 index card that was typed on a manual typewriter.
Yep.
That was it. I started with a revolver. We were handwriting reports. We didn't have tasers. We didn't have body cameras. We didn't have car cameras. So things have changed a lot. Now imagine if that police department, which now serves about 50,000 people, had never modernized, got with modern technology. But you have to be willing to upgrade, stay current, but then you got to train everybody from the senior officers, okay, or old guard, if you will, to the newbies. And there's different ways to train. So we are just implementing a completely new training model. In fact, the current class is in it right now. And so, the San Jose model has been around for probably 45 years, okay? And that's what we were using in this agency. It was pretty much used in every agency I worked for. But the generations have changed. The police academies have trained. What you're required to teach has changed. But the FTO program didn't change. And so we were washing out a lot of people. And you already go through a huge investment to hire them, get them in the academy, pass the academy, and then they were washing out in the training program. So it's like, okay, we can either keep repeating this and have the same failure rate, which is a lousy ROI, by the way,
It is.
or we can change our model. So we don't do FTO anymore. We call it PTO, and it stands for Patrol Training Officer, because that's where they start out, at least on my law enforcement side. And then we do adult education style. And the goal is to get them to be successful instead of let's wash out as many people as we can. Excuse me, Mike. I thought I had turned all this stuff off.
Got so many things set up in my phone and my thing to remind me, because if I don't, I'm going to forget something. So I got stuff
Well,
going. Then I have to remember what I set it for.
and it's a brand new phone. So, it was my personal phone. So whenever you get a new phone, nobody continues with the same platform you had before.
Everything's different.
Hopefully it's off.
Well, Sheriff, let me ask you this, because when we look at how things have changed, the one piece of equipment that I think really illustrates how much things have changed in our profession is the flashlight. Because if you remember the old 4D cell flashlight that was like a mini baseball bat.
Yeah,
and
the light.
Yeah, but it was like a bat, right? And it still didn't project that bright of a light. Now you've got these little bitty flashlights, but you actually have to train people how to properly use flashlights, because if you shine the light improperly, you may be revealing more of yourself than you are of the bad guy. So I love how you put that there. But Sheriff, that 51 years has to count for something. You know what I mean? What happened 51 years ago, it may look a little bit different than it does now. And we may use different terminology, but that experience has to count for something. But you, unlike a lot of other people, have said, you know what? That's some information that needs to be passed down. And so you undertook a project. And I found out recently about the project, and I think you know this about me, that this is right up my alley. You hit the sweet spot with Mike, and you decided to write a book about leadership. What was it that made you say, you know what, there's some stuff that I need to pass down, because I'm not always going to be here. None of us are always going to be here. What made you decide to pass that type of information down?
Well, it was about 18 months into working in the few moments that a sheriff or a police chief has, right? But the reason I wanted to do it is I had people that mentored me, that sent me to schools, and then I look at what I did in Orange County and what we've done at the Flagler County Sheriff's Office, and transform this agency from really a not very well respected agency to now one that is recognized throughout the state and in some areas across the country. And so what I wanted to do was provide some inspiration and maybe a little bit of guidance on how to be a transformational leader. And so I decided to write this book, and I wrote the book in a way that you can use it for any occupation, it's not law enforcement specific. Now, the case studies that are in there are from my career. And so I talk about a leadership on how to empower people, what a transformational leader is. And then I supplement it with real life case studies that frankly I lived or was a part of. One of the case studies, the tale of three sheriffs. And one of those sheriffs listed as he was a one-term sheriff, okay? And it really highlights how he became a one-term sheriff. And then the other two did some things similar in the beginning of this one-term sheriff, but he was able to turn it around and actually be a transformational leader. And the other one was clearly a transformational leader from the beginning. And so I put things like that. And then as I travel and read, I would take notes of what some leaders have said. And there's a chapter in there. So if you don't want to read the entire book, you can go to those pages and read one or two lines, sometimes three lines of what I think people were historical transformational leaders. And some of them going back hundreds of years, some of it being more recent that people will recognize. And so I tried to make it where it was a pretty easy way to learn, but I wanted to do something to pay it forward. I'm not trying to make any money on this book. In fact, I don't even know how many copies have been sold. I know so far I've got a five star rating, but it was really just my way to pay it forward because I'm not going to be here forever. And when I was elected sheriff, my whole goal was to change the culture and lay a new foundation for this agency so that no matter who comes in after me, because it's voted by the public, sometimes, frankly, they don't make very good decisions. I think they made a great decision for me, obviously.
3 times, right?
Yeah, right. And I'm gonna go again. But I wanted it where the employees would know what they should be doing for this agency and the community. So that's why we do a lot of mentoring and training in this agency. And the book came kind of afterthought. And frankly, if I really tell you the impetus to it, it started out as kind of a joke. And the book is not a joke at all. What happened was I was the chairman of the board of the Florida Sheriff Association, and the current president was a fellow sheriff, and he had written a book when he was a captain with the Florida Highway Patrol. And so every time a VIP came to speak to the Florida sheriffs at our conferences, whether it was the governor, attorney general, lieutenant governor, you name it, whoever it was, he would give them a signed copy of his book. And it became kind of a joke amongst the 67 sheriffs during these meetings. So I said, okay, I'm going to write a book. And I started to write a book that wasn't serious, okay? But then it transformed into what you see today. And I think that was a better way to go. My fellow sheriffs don't have this book. I'm going to be sworn in as president of the Sheriff Association in July of 2027. And I'm going to give them all a book then. I'm going to have a little lead in and kind of roast the sheriff that started me down this journey, although his book is really boring if you read it.
And I laugh because I did. I ordered it when I found out. And folks, for our listeners, you can get that on Amazon. We'll include the link for it in the show notes. You can also go to the Command Presence website to our recommended reading list. It has already made that list right there. But Sheriff, when you sit down and you start putting pen to paper, because I think you and I use the same terminology, pen to paper, even though we're typing.
Right.
It provides a clarity. It requires a clarity of thought that sometimes is lacking in society today. When you have to sit there and force yourself, how do I transmit to somebody else who I may never meet and try to get them to understand this concept? I really do think that it helps to clarify in your own mind for your own people the concepts that you're talking about.
Well, I agree with that. And all of my leadership team has been given this book, and we did training with an outside consultant that came in, and it wasn't really based on my book at all. It was based on a book that he had written. But that's when I rolled out my book to him, so they can kind of reinforce my mindset on how we should be transformational leaders at all levels. You might not be the top dog, but you are the leader of your group and your team. And hopefully whoever you work for has explained how your team is an integral part of the overall mission. I meet annually with all my employees, almost 400 employees, and I say, this is what we did together. This is the vision for this year, so that everybody says, oh, yeah, look what we did together, because we get so focused on our specific areas, CSI, major case, the detention sides, the bailiffs in the courthouse, you name it, that we don't see always what we accomplished together. And so it helps get the buy-in. This is what we did together. We reduced crime 54%. Last year, another 20% reduction from the year before. And then here's the vision for the future. Because how can you expect your employees and even your leadership team to understand your vision if you don't mentor it and explain it?
Yes.
And so what I tried to do in this book was explain how you inspire change, how you empower people, and how you create that vision in a layman's term. You can probably tell. I mean, I have a master's degree. Okay. I wrote this, frankly, you might have to beat this, a pain in the ass thesis. Okay.
Rating just for that. So.
Okay. So, I didn't want it to be that kind of textbook. I wanted it to be something that people could read it. They would understand it, but then more importantly, the case study would reinforce it. So the aha moment would come on, or the light bulb would come on and say, okay, I get it. And, when I was writing this book and I was looking for, these different quotes by people that I think were good leaders. Okay. My wife and I were in Europe somewhere. I don't remember where it was. And I saw this monument, and I can't even think of his name. It might have been Shakespeare. I don't remember who it was. It's in the book. You can find out who it is. And it had this amazing quote that this individual had said. So I pulled out I read it, and I said, wow, that needs to be in my book. So I pulled out my phone, took a photo of it. So I was doing things like that over the 18 months to create this book.
Well, Sheriff, I think you said something there, and this is what I want to try to bring things to a close with. When leaders fail to sit down with their people and connect their daily activities to a bigger picture, I'm a big World War II buff. And when you go and you look at the bombing crews in Europe during World War II, and they would go deep into Germany and they would bomb a ball bearing plant. Well, they're going through flak and fighters coming in, and then they're having to fly through flak and fighters going back out. If a leader never sits down and explains to them, so listen, you may be thinking this is only ball bearings, but because we reduce their ability to produce ball bearings, it also reduced their tank production by 12%. And because their tank production was reduced by 12%, our people were able to do this. And it's given those folks that you work with this higher altitude view where they have that aha moment that you're talking about. I said, that's why we do that. That's why we go and do this right here, because that connected with this activity over here, that's where the crime reduction comes from.
Well, you're exactly right. And that's why we pulled in my detention side so much into this entire vision of reducing crime. When I was elected sheriff, our jail, which can hold 454 inmates, was a warehouse. 4 walls, no programs, keep them inside, make sure they don't escape. That is important, by the way.
Yes.
But they don't hurt other inmates or the staff. That's all that was going on. Now, I'm a law and order sheriff. I call a dirt bag a dirt bag. They have to earn it, but I'll do it. And I'm very engaged in the community. But in a county jail, unlike a state prison, we arrest in our county, about 300 people a month. We know that most of those people are going to go back into our community. So if we can help them become a productive citizen instead of sucking the taxpayers dry because we have to house them in the jail, then I don't have the recidivism and it helps my crime go down. Well, before, detention always felt that they were, the stepchild from law enforcement. And now they are an award-winning jail. We've won multiple awards. It's now an accredited jail. The medical is accredited. And we highlight all of that. So now they have just as much publicity, if you will, as my law enforcement side, but they are integrated with the team for the big vision of reducing crime. And we've seen that.
Listen, I think that the corrections side is one of the most undertrained portions of the law enforcement profession, yet they have direct impact on the road officer's safety when those people go back to the street. Because if they haven't done it right inside those four walls, then those people are more likely to repeat that. And so I couldn't agree with you more on that. It really is, and it becomes very cliche, but it really has to be a team effort in order for it to be truly successful.
Well, for the first time in the history of our agency, one of my commanders on the detention side is at the FBI Academy right now attending. Never been done before.
That is fantastic. And I'm telling, man, the NA is this opportunity for shared experiences and shared information so that when they come back, it allows the entire agency to benefit from that time away.
That's correct. And, the jail, law enforcement, I've got 2 or 3 graduates, current employees in the law enforcement side, but I had nobody on the detention side. And it was like, why don't I have that?
Hey,
so I've got a great.
I'd like to extend an invitation. I don't even know who it is, but when your corrections commander gets back, I'd love to be able to talk to him in this format and find out what it is they learned. And
Okay.
they're going to be able to go and talk to the other parts of the corrections profession, because if we make that side better, we reduce recidivism. There's no doubt about it. And again, we have to look at it investment rather than an expense.
So the inmates, they go through our programs, and they have to be selected for it. We have to go through it. And we've got all kinds of programs. We just graduated one earlier this week. The first time we had inmates graduate from an auto body restoration class in partnership with Flagler Technical College. All 3 of them, as soon as they get out of jail, have job offers.
And when you have that right there, the likelihood that they're going to go back and repeat the crimes that brought them there in the first place goes down significantly, and it makes your people safer, and it makes the community safer.
And we have longitudinal studies that prove that.
Yep.
That the recidivism rate for those that go through the program is only about 30%. And that's usually because they didn't follow the guidance. They went back to their alleged friends,
Yes,
which got them back involved, typically in drugs or theft. But those that the 70% that do follow all the education they got, the training they got off the drugs in our jail, or got the mental health they needed, whatever it is, they become productive citizens.
and that's a win-win for everybody.
Correct.
Well, Sheriff, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me today and talk to me. I do have a favor to ask of you.
Okay.
Next time we run into each other, I know it's kind of hard to see, but right over here, this is my bookshelf.
Okay.
I used to have several bookshelves, but eventually I realized my kids probably weren't going to read the same things I did, so I started downsizing. But one of the shelves up here is my autograph bookshelf. So next time I run into, I'm going to be bringing this, and I would love for you to autograph that because being able to interact with people like yourself is the reason why I do what I do. So I thank you so much for taking the time to do that with me today.
Yeah, it was my honor. Thanks for asking, Mike. And I'll absolutely do that. In fact, I signed one today somebody brought to me that had purchased.
Well, mine will be used by the time I see you, but it'll be well used. So,
Well, that's good.
but folks, I appreciate you stopping by and listening today. There is so much that we can learn from those that have gone before us and have done this correctly. I highly recommend the book. Again, but that doesn't mean that the lesson's not worth learning. So, as always, as you go throughout your day-to-day work, be the leader that you wish you had.
Thank you for joining us for the Faces of Leadership podcast, presented by Command Presence Training. A special thank you to the leaders who share their experiences and lessons with our audience. For more episodes, resources, and training opportunities, visit commandpresence.net. And remember, leadership is about people in action. Strive to be the leader you wish you had. We'll see you next time.